So let's talk about the very first time Operation Avalanche came up, the very first conversation.
The movie first came up on the plane ride home from Park City in 2013. And I was sitting beside Miller. Who else was on that flight?
It was just us.
Really?
Yeah, we were on separate flights going home.
Okay, so we were flying beside one another, and we had just had a really great screening of The Dirties. It was the world premiere, and it seemed as though we were going to get to make another movie. We still didn't really know anything, but we knew that we got enough attention that we would have a chance to make another film. We were just talking about what kind of movie we wanted to make, and we wanted to make another fake documentary. We knew that, and we knew we wanted me and Owen to probably act in it again together, but we didn't know anything else, and we were just kind of joking around about the idea of making a fake documentary before cameras existed, because Miller was really into that Peter Watkins film Monk, which I still have only seen about 20 minutes of, but that's enough to kind of get what it's doing,
It's very boring.
Which is a documentary about the painter, Edward Munch, and it's crazy because it's set in a time when there's no cameras, but people are looking in the lens of the camera, and we thought, oh, that'd be so wicked to do. But on the plane ride, we were kind of trying to pick a moment in history, and I don't know how, but it kept getting moved up and up and up and up and up. And then when we were talking about like the dawn of cinema, we were like, oh yeah, but that's gonna be so much like that Scorsese movie. And so we kept moving the time period up, I think forgetting our original idea of having it be when there were no cameras. And then I had said, well, why don't we do something about faking the moon landing? And right away we knew that that was the best idea. I don't even know why. It's something that we talked about, faking moon landing like as a joke, but it was perfect because it was, again, a character making a movie, and the movie is the most famous movie ever seen, ever, in the history of cinema, and that is the perfect kind of project for someone like Matt to be obsessed over and to drive him to do crazy things. And I think from that moment on, we just knew. I came home and talked to Boles about it, and he was like, yeah, it doesn't sound too shitty. I'm impressed you came up with that on your own, to be honest. And
I still think probably Miller did, but...
If he did, you don't think that he would be shutting this down right now? That's not what happened. I came up with it.
You two signed a backroom deal.
That's right. I get to take the
Okay,
credit.
listen, from now on, it's my idea. It's my idea. Yeah, well, everybody more or less tacitly signed that agreement. But that was the moment, and then then I came home and talked to Boles about it right away, and we started talking about it instantly. And believe it or not, we had a trailer to that movie shot by March 20th, 2013, with the characters, more or less an idea of the plot, and many lines that exist in the final movie are in that original trailer.
But no same footage.
None of the footage we used.
Yes.
Except for the
Shot of the movie.
The opening.
No way!
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So the opening shot, that footage of me and Owen
Yeah.
goofing around. You wanna know what's crazy about that footage?
What?
Boozy is in that shot.
And we had it in the movie for a second.
And Boozy is in that shot because in the original plot, the three of us all worked at the CIA and were buddies. And so that shot, Andy is just kind of touring around with the camera, and if you go a little bit further to the right, you see Boozy smoking a cigarette going.
And he's actually drawing storyboards
For the moon landing.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's also a big chalkboard that says Operation Avalanche. That's actually in the movie, even though that footage exists 2 years before you join the CIA.
Which is fine by me because Matt's sketching out his dream mission titles.
But I think it was Boozy that had the idea for the title. I remember
I
trying
don't
to...
think it was.
I think it was probably me
No,
because it seems stupid
wasn't.
enough.
It wasn't.
Well, Boozy, okay, so Matt.
I'm saying I think it was probably me who came up with it because it seems like the kind of ridiculous title.
I think it was you because you were actually one of the guys who was arrested in that pro, right?
Yeah, so I knew about it intimately.
You wanted to pay tribute to the
That
Oscar
probe didn't
winners.
arrest anybody until like a year ago, so it's impossible. I could have been investigated, but
So Matt comes home from Slam Dance, goes to Boozy's place. What?
no, we were living together at the time.
Okay, you come home and you talk to your roommate. And
Yeah.
what do you say?
Well, I mean, I don't remember, but
That's a disappointed voice.
then we started coming up with ideas and writing them on the whiteboards and, trying to sketch out a story.
Yep.
And we must have done it very fast because we were shooting by March. Because we had the idea was like February 1st.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much story in that trailer, but
You cut out a whole year. We shot that trailer in March of 2014.
I don't think so.
No, we shot in March of 2013.
Yeah.
Because we were going to shoot the movie,
Yeah.
Johnson was like, we'll be all done before we go to Locarno.
Yeah.
And it was done soon because I remember when Johnson called me to describe the movie. I was talking about this earlier today. Not that it's particularly interesting, but I was eating at the. It's not too interesting. I was eating at the Golden House, Yonge in Somerville. Very good, cheap Chinese food. And I got the call, and I was outside holding the Chinese food, walking up and down the street. Didn't want to get off the phone.
Did you drop your Chinese food?
I
Go to the moon? Golly gee willikers!
But that confirms that it was very cold. So yes, it was probably February.
No, it was definitely March. And I remember shooting that trailer and us being so obsessed with snow. And thinking, because we already had the title of Operation Avalanche, and we were like,
snow.
and because when we were conceiving it, the idea was that most of the movie took place in Langley, Virginia, and we wanted to play the winters as like a really desolate, scary place. And so if you watch that trailer, that original trailer, there's a lot of snow, us in the snow, walking into snow, really beautiful images. But in the actual film, I don't think there's a single shot with snow in it except for us running in that snowy place.
That was a good one, Jared.
Thank you. Okay.
So you guys are Zapruder Films. I would love to hear, why, what it is you love about conspiracy theory, why you named your production company that, and what you brought into this film already. Like, what was your interest? Talk to me about JFK.
Well, that's a movie that I know Miller and I both really are obsessed with. But I think the names of Zapruder Films was funny, not because of the conspiracy element of it, but because of the
found footage.
The found footage element of it's like the greatest found footage shot ever, and there's so much story attached to it, and the idea that this dude was just shooting and got something awesome, and now all of this story around it. Well, yeah.
How much luckier could he have gotten?
Yeah, that's the way I think, right? I'm like, oh my God, what a wicked shot. Yes, President dead.
Imagine if Zapruder was exactly like Matt Johnson.
Yeah.
And it's just like telling his friends after.
He'd build a whole movie around that. I'd be like, I got the perfect shot, okay? JFK is dead. So now we need a guy to play JFK before he gets shot. But that to me is such a perfect, that is like it. Like that's what I think at least in the Dirties and this, and definitely our TV show, we're trying to get these moments that you just couldn't plan. Like the camera's rolling and something happens by mistake, but because you were rolling, you got something that you could never have written. Right. And that is, I think, exactly what makes both Operation Avalanche and this movie that's what I like about those movies.
Yeah. I don't know if you read that book on American conspiracy theories too. But what's amazing about that piece of footage is it was the first time that America started to doubt cinematic truth in a grand way.
Because they thought it was faked?
Well, yeah, of course. They think that it was the first time that a piece of cinema created doubt and was examined in depth by the American public, which gave them doubt in their government and the truths that they're being told.
Oh, and in images in general.
And the death of JFK, and it's like so perfectly lines up with the moon landing, and makes sense that as people started to see conspiracies, or you start to see, that was like the first conspiracy theory in America that was broadly accepted, and it all stemmed from that little piece of film and how people went over it and over it.
We have that Life magazine in
right.
our office, and it breaks down, frame by frame, 237.
What year is that issue?
67. I always think how crazy it would have been if that film just didn't exist.
Right.
Like the way we think of that piece of history.
There's no story.
Different.
And they didn't release it for 15 years or something, right?
No, the jury saw it, like that you see in JFK.
And Time owned it.
And Time bought it, but they didn't. Yeah, I don't know when it was released. I think it was 25 years until the public had seen it.
Wow.
Well, I remember, maybe this is me remembering completely wrong, but wasn't Oliver Stone showing it in JFK one of the first times that most people had ever seen it?
Well, I know it had been 50 years since the Warren Report or something, and documents were released, but they were still blacked out or something like that. But was that 1990? I think that lines up.
Well, no, because they talk about that in
the movie.
The movie,
at the
they
end of the
say in 25 years or in 15 years, this Warren Report will be.
He hopes his
made
children's children.
Right, 25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that movie.
All right, well, nevertheless, you guys obviously have a fondness for conspiracy and conspiracy theory. I know that Boozy is a De Palma fan, and we were talking the other night about Blow Out, we were talking about. But there's that moment where, at the barbecue, where you guys, see the spooks in the background. So, yeah, I don't know, can you talk about...
There's also a lot more stuff like that shot where you see them in the background, but that's kind of the only one that made it into the movie, right? Mm-hmm. There's a ton of stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think Owen wrote that scene.
Yes, that was my kind
The
of
barbecue?
You did actually write that scene.
I remember that. It was a very good idea.
Thank
That
And you didn't write it like on set. You called me and you said, "Okay, I think we need a scene where the guys find those guys in the distance," which is funny because they were in the distance of that shot, but we were just choosing to ignore so much of the stuff we were shooting.
Yeah. Hold that back and say, well, there's that early shot that Zapruder's in, that hilarious.
What was Zapruder?
Oh yeah,
We
But
call
Zapruder-
stalking through the
We call the CIA guy Zapruder as shorthand, which is extremely confusing because the production company's called Zapruder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know
And
why.
the characters were calling him Zapruder.
Yeah, Zapruder was like,
Inexplicably.
Like AR out Zapruder. Yeah. You let Zapruder get away.
You let Zapruder get away.
Yeah.
It's so
Owen's off
funny.
camera.
I know why, because he was holding the.
He's holding a Super 8 camera.
Oh, and we had a little
Oh,
joke.
time.
Yeah, so the
It was a
characters
joke,
had an
yeah.
inside
But we
joke.
never
Just-
set the joke. We never shot anything where you guys
No.
are like, look, he's holding the camera.
And it's not even definitively a Super 8
And
camera.
Boozy
No.
was yelling, "It's Zapruder!" when he's first. I've never seen him before.
It shows we really knew what we were doing.
Well, also the culture of making the movie, like you just think, oh, this shit's gonna make sense, and then you're finally sitting down and watching it and being like, oh yeah, well I know that guy's Zapruder because that's what me and my friends call him. But nobody in the movie calls him Zapruder ever. Oh man, that's gonna be weird.
Agent Zapruder.
So how much or little, and I know little is the answer, does the final product resemble your skeleton of a script?
Well,
I mean,
there's just a lot taken out.
yeah, and a lot of things have changed, but the gist of it is the same.
Yeah.
I would say your script on the Dirties
It was
is
closer,
to the finished product than this movie to the other one.
Because this was a far more convoluted plot.
I think it was written to be convoluted, to be like a thriller with lots of twists and turns and red herrings and things. But the thing that we didn't account for is as soon as we got into making it, the form was so disorienting
And confusing on its
and confusing on its own. Like to be able to follow a single plot thread in that form of the documentary being made by these guys.
JFK is the perfect example of that. So JFK does that perfectly, right? There's not a more complicated explication than you'll find. There is no more complicated explication than you'll find in JFK, right? They're talking about the intricacies of this crazy conspiracy, but look at what Stone can do. He can cut to close-ups at any time, zoom in on somebody's expression.
Sort of stock footage, recreation.
Anything he wants, like to make any point that the film is trying to make, whereas us, like look at the sequence where I'm explaining the conspiracy to the CIA. Right. It's just me, and then we can shoot to only the most real documentary footage that Andy and Jared are shooting. It's like we don't actually get to show like subtlety in any real way, and if we do, it almost seems ham-fisted and faked. So a lot of these things that we thought where characters would think one thing, then the cameraman would find something else, and then characters would be betraying characters, you just can't do that in a documentary. It's impossible. And it's a good thing we didn't try, because our movie would have looked like total shit.
Yeah,
because you guys would be in getting
Perfect close-up of
Yeah.
every reaction. It would just feel so fake.
But we had to learn that because we definitely didn't think that going in. I know I certainly felt like we were invincible and can do anything. And it took about a year before we were like, oh no shit, we're basically just making the dirties again. And we can only do the exact same things that we did before.
So what were sort of the top 5 lessons of that first year? The humps you had to get over?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, top 5.
Or what are some of the lessons?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, I mean, a lesson was that the most interesting thing in the movie was watching these guys fake the moon landing, and anything else was secondary. And so, for that reason, we lost our female lead and cut her out of the movie completely. I mean, you see her a little bit at the beginning, and you might think something's going to happen with that character. But she's not in the film because there was no room for her. And to your point, it's hard to shoot a love story in a documentary when you can't cut to these close-ups.
Yeah.
You can't have these moments.
Can't have private moments.
And anytime the camera's shooting it, it makes Matt's character a complete creep.
He's automatically.
Now there is that.
So that was a good lesson, and in hindsight, it was like, well, how did we not realize that from the get-go?
There's that moment in the movie where Matt reaches for Chrissy's hand, and it's really funny, but I get the feeling it's totally out of context.
The drive was.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
He's going
that's
to
right.
feel her.
I'm actually going to feel
yeah.
her pregnant stomach.
Yeah.
But I mean that it's, you know what, when Miller was talking about that, I think that the real lesson is that we always had better be very wary about working with performers or story moments that rely on anybody other than me, Owen, and Josh. Because I think that whenever we got into real trouble was when we tried to have story centered around people who were not our very good friends, and it was hard to control those moments in the way that we could control these other moments. And if you look
I
at
mean,
the film,
more planning, you could have done it.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I agree.
I also argue that
Complete lack of planning was another lesson that.
like because
I resent that.
Not on your part. You did the best you could.
the only reason no one else could do it is because nobody else knew the story and the characters and where they were in such depth. Because you only had those conversations as friends.
Exactly.
And I think that's why you have to, that's why the friendships feel real, is because they are real. But I would argue that with more character work and being able to work with people that like you actually do bring them in and do talk in depth about the characters and where they're at, I think you could have worked with anybody.
Of course, yeah.
But that's just like, of course with friends there's shorthand. Like with Owen and Boozy, you had already been talking about these things in depth just naturally.
and they knew the story.
Yeah.
We also because of the nature of the shoot. I think one of the lessons too is, at least going on with this show, is learning to shoot alternate moods of characters, because you never know where they're gonna land.
Right.
Because there was this whole part of the story where Owen was pissed off at Matt constantly. So anytime we wanted to cut to those scenes, Owen was just in the grumpiest mood and just it made no sense why he just hated you so much.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be friends, but he's mad.
The first NASA scene, like they show up in NASA and Owen, most of the takes, he played it angry. And I think it's because in our heads we thought, oh yeah, Matt and Owen are best friends in the Dirties. Everyone knows that.
Right.
But now Owen's going to be mad at Matt.
From the get-go. Well, I think the idea was that
school.
I think the idea in the initial draft was that Matt sort of sneaks them onto Operation Zipper against Owen's will,
And he doesn't want
and
to
he
do
doesn't
it.
want to leave his wife, and he doesn't want to go. And so, of course, he was playing it that way because that's how we thought it was going to go. And then we rewrote it. And the other thing I think we learned that year was that we had all this amazing stock footage that we got from the NASA archives. I think we have the largest collection of NASA stock footage outside of America.
Wow.
Because they just sent us everything, full HD cams, and we...
Thinking you're
copied it
making
all.
this documentary.
Yeah. And then we, Tristan and Curt looked through all that footage. We copied it. We started planning the effect shots that Tristan was going to be working on. But we also realized there was so much stuff we could do by putting that footage on a TV and using sort of these TV broadcasts to help us tell our story, specifically with timeline. Because the timeline of the movie is like 2.5 years, and it was quite tricky. Again, in this form, it's like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And I mean, we even cheat at one time. You see us with a calendar, which is
Whatever.
I mean, but the news footage, and we knew the history of the Apollo program really well, but our audience might not. So seeing, this is Apollo 4 and this is Apollo 8, and Apollo, Jared designed that graphic where you see the Apollo titles coming through and the
Plus,
arrows.
oh really? That was a design graphic?
He built that.
Oh, really? I didn't know that either.
Because it was
That's great. That really
we were
helped.
struggling to be like, how do you show there's multiple Apollo missions, but the big one is Apollo 11, because not everyone's going to know that.
Very smart.
So we were like, just the simplest graphic, put Walter
Cronkite's voice.
Cronkite
really
behind
helps.
it, and you're like, yeah,
I would
sure.
say Cronkite did half the job for us.
I mean, framing the timeline around the Apollo missions is very, very smart. So can you talk about framing some of the other stuff around found footage and how much that footage sort of guided and informed your footage?
Yeah, we should talk about the sequence that the sequences you and Curt did, because that was basically your department. I didn't even look at raw stock footage for the most part. It was you and Curt who made those
Mission
selects
control?
from everything. I'm thinking about
From the launch?
For even like the web interview, all that stuff, that was you guys.
Or when you go to Texas.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what happened is everything came to us from NASA, and then I don't even know what the role breakdown was, but I know I wasn't watching that footage.
Yeah,
You
we had
were.
a timeline full of 4 hours or something like that. And actually, Bobby Upchurch was sitting on the keys going through.
He's
it all.
watching this right now.
Yeah, I said shout out to you, Bobby.
So
wherever you
what
are.
did Bobby do?
Bobby was sitting there, and he was actually helping us make the selects while we'd be like, okay, that's cool, that's good, that's interesting. And what's funny is that most of the time we weren't looking for what was happening on the screen that was interesting. It was more
Right.
like the camera movement and trying to make it match.
Do you understand what he means by that? Is because NASA shot most of their shit on sticks, but we couldn't use any of that.
Yeah.
So these guys were literally going for needles in a haystack of only the moments where the cameraman would keep the camera on while moving in a weird way.
Right.
And one of my favorite sequences in the movie, and you guys will never get credit for it, which is so sad, is that they found 5 shots that interlocked through movement that were shot at completely different times, where you see cameras moving through mission control and then cutting, and all different angles in mission control that could be replicated by our camera team. And how you even thought to do that is so crazy, because it goes from the shot, you know the sequence?
Yeah.
It's the shot where I walk into mission control, walk up, the camera follows me, cuts to Andy's camera where we see Jared walk into the corner, set up a camera, stop. Like, I didn't even know how you guys figured that out. It's crazy that you basically composed a scene using archival shots that were moving.
Yeah,
it's nuts.
It's quite a challenge.
All right, well, to talk about graphics for a second, another thing that I think people who watch this movie will take for granted, like I did when I saw it, is the fact that in Kubrick, you are animating photographs.
Yeah.
How the hell did you do that?
Well, we basically had a problem where we couldn't reuse Kubrick's well-known footage from his behind the scenes of other films that he's done, and because it was so recognizable, and it would have taken us out of our movie. So we basically went to the drawing board, and I had a late night, and I looked
We'd
at
actually killed the sequence. Like we were trying to think of
not we. You.
Well, it was looking like trash. It was like really bad quality, and there was no way that anyone on earth was going to believe it.
Right.
And so I went to the drawing board at my house, and I was looking at all these photos, and then I pitched a crazy idea to them, and luckily they trusted me.
I remember I thought you were out of your mind.
Yeah, they all kind of...
I had no faith in you.
I remember the day coming in and being like, okay, I think we're going to do something, but it's a little crazy. And you don't know Tristan that well, but it's like, if Tristan comes in and says he's going to do something a little bit crazy, right away you're like, okay, there's no way this will work then, because like he's already, if he says something's not going to work, then it's just not going to work.
But he said it would work.
Well, he said that it might work.
Right.
And then 6 months later, it did work. But I'll show you. So here's so you check it out. There's the photo that he used.
Right.
I'm going to show the mission control mock-up.
And you keyed out this guy and you replaced it with Matt.
So
getting an autograph.
Basically, I dimensionalized this photograph using like Kubrick's known height, and so we could get the scale of the world. And then we built this scene in 3D, and then built that 3D scene in real life.
No shit.
And then Tristan directed all those sequences over the course of 2 or 3 days. In a green screen studio in Scarborough, where I kid you not, nobody knew what was going on except him, and he was basically just telling us what we needed to do, and we did it, gave him the footage, and that was it. I don't think you showed me a shot for like maybe a month after that or something like that.
For good reason, because it looked really rough,
Yeah.
and to gain Miller's trust, it had to look pretty good. Right.
And it wasn't a department. It was Tristan.
Yeah, just him doing it by himself. And it was crazy. I remember when you showed me the first shot, I don't remember which it was.
It was Kubrick sitting down.
Oh yeah, Kubrick sitting down nodding, and I was like
crazy.
so transfixed. I was like, I can't believe you did that. And it's because I've seen lots of animation where they make photographs move, and it always looks so loopy, right? Like the movement is looped or the hand is looped, and you're like, yeah, it's not real.
It's like Monty Python or something.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's just so fake. And this I saw, and this was before we'd done like the Super 8 look on it, and before we came up with the idea of the circle that covered everything. Like this was like just the original, and I was like, this is really going to work. Not only will it work, nobody's going to have any idea how we did this. Yeah. Nobody.
Until now.
Right.
I remember being so afraid he was going to look like Orville Redenbacher.
Oh yeah, I remember those Orville Redenbacher jokes.
Let's talk about Andy and Jared for a second. How did you guys sort of build your characters? Do you think that you did have characters? I mean, I think you were sort of picking on me when I brought that to you in Toronto. When I told you I liked your character.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, what did you say about it?
I said I like your buffoonish character, some to that effect.
Right. Who was picking, which is a hell of a thing to say to somebody who's basically playing themselves. But no, I think we were just playing ourselves because
I was a shopkeep from the 1930s.
Were you?
Yeah, basically.
I wondered why you used so much slang.
The Hungarian butcher.
Yeah, the Hungarian butcher. That's right.
No, I think because it's super easy when you are literally just playing a cameraman who is learning everything for the first time. The thing that's really hard, and I think it's the same thing that was hard in the Dirties and anything we do, is the first time something happens on set and it's really fun and it's really exciting, that's great, but half the time you miss it or something goes wrong technically, and then you have to replicate that same surprise with the camera, and you can't anticipate any of the moves. You have to somehow learn to unlearn the move every time. Ultimately, it's impossible. You do something too many times and it becomes stale no matter what. But like prolonging that moment where the camera no longer feels aimless and like it's seeing everything for the first time was probably the hardest thing. And I guess that's kind of like character.
Yeah, it's not about acting as a character. It's about acting as a cameraman who doesn't know. What's going on.
And that's so hard because the moment you start anticipating lines and knowing what's going to happen, it totally loses its life. The footage feels completely fake.
We definitely had some conversations too about kind of where, like, what the heads of what would be in the heads of these like '60s cameramen, how they would be shooting this footage all day and how exhausted they would constantly be, and like and just like little things like deciding to zoom using our hands rather than using any kind of rig because it has to have that feeling of the zoom
and focus too. It's like you can't be zooming and focusing at the same time unless it's one of those cool little barrel zooms. Like it had to be a punch it in then focus. Even if you knew the focus where it was going to be and you could nail it. Not nailing it, and then repeatedly not nailing it. Otherwise, the footage gets to.
But I would say in terms of character, there were clearer characters for you probably than would appear in the film, and it was just a lot of stuff just got cut away. Like
what was the?
Well, you were a war photographer.
Oh right, yeah, that's right.
And you were a Jew.
The only Jew in the CIA.
That's right.
The piece of footage that I'm most sad didn't make it into the film was me throwing a bullseye.
Oh yeah,
a dartboard, and then we traded, and I gave you the camera, and I was in charge of the mission.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then you said something about the only Jew in the CIA is now heading up this mission.
Then there's also a very funny thing. We don't spend a ton of time in Matt's hotel room, but we had this very funny joke that Jared and Andy would have the hotel room across the hall
that we're sharing,
and that there was always this crazy stuff going on in Jared and Andy's room.
Owen, had you acted before the Dirties?
No.
How did you get sucked into all this?
Well, because a good friend of all of ours, Evan Morgan, was my roommate and knew Matt and Jay and everybody, and basically. Well, I don't know. These guys know the story better than me, but I understand a lot of people had auditioned for the role that I played in the Dirties, and then someone suggested me because my voice sounds similar to Johnson's, sort of.
That was Evan.
And then I don't know. It just sort of worked out. Matt went to the audition process was mostly like Matt testing whether or not he could hang out with me for a long time. So
but then I remember the screen test though when you came to the Brookfield.
But he already had the part by that point.
No, because we were like, okay, he'd be great, but we need to see if he can do it on camera because you guys had a dynamic already.
But I do. So what it was is Jared turned the camera on and was filming me, and Matt would ask me stuff like, so. I don't know, do you want to make this movie? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess so, sure. And like we were just talking about whatever, and Matt was trying to get me a job at the Ontario Science Centre, which he ended up doing, and we spent a lot of time together there and really became friends. But the point was, like, we talked about that and just sort of talked about stuff, and then turned off the camera, and Matt was like, oh, that was great. I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, the camera was on you, and you just weren't being weird.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah, that's so funny. I hadn't thought about that till now.
So he's like, it's not about acting. It's just about like having a camera on you and not like really being like, well,
sure.
Matt, did you also work at the Science Center?
Well, I worked at the Science Center from the moment a year before I graduated film school. My girlfriend at the time, Catherine Mallinson, suggested I work there, and that was my only job from graduating film school until The Dirties was released. No, until we started.
You worked even through The Dirties.
Yes, I worked through The Dirties. So until The Dirties got into Slam Dance, I remember that's when I quit.
Yeah, that's right.
So I worked there right from film school.
Yeah, when you went back to school.
Did you spend a lot of the time working there thinking about outer space?
Well, it's funny. Most of the shit that I knew about space was because of working at the Science Center. As crazy as that is. So just the fact that. Just basic things like Operation Paperclip, how I knew so many Nazis worked there, and just like little cool details about space. Yeah. I knew just because I would give tours of the space
floor at the Science Center.
And we tried to shoot some of that trailer there. We snuck in.
Yeah, we shot it.
You snuck into the Science Center in addition to NASA.
Yeah.
We snuck into the NASA set at the Science Center.
It was hard to sneak into the Science Center.
Oh my god.
I remember
Because they have a security team.
I was terrified. That was very scary.
That's amazing. All right. Well, while Matt's in the kitchen, who has a favorite story about? I don't know. I mean, anything in production. Matt's back.
Well, I was just there. I didn't ask me anything. I don't care. I came to get the Heath bars.
I want to hear from our first AD, Matt Greyson.
Oh, I have nothing good to say. I've got nothing good
He
to say.
probably has some good dirt.
No. This is great though. Because Matt, what was your most stressed out moment of the entire shoot?
That's a great question.
I don't know if do you
What?
get stressed out?
You were stressed out a few days.
Usually sometime like 15 minutes after call when Johnson hadn't showed up yet.
I was thinking about killing myself back in the York Flophouse.
Hold on, I have an amazing
That's
story.
why I was
Okay.
late. I'm not a joke.
I have a good story. So Andy and I and Johnson were sleeping at this apartment near set for a lot of the
flop
things.
house, the York
flop
flop
house.
house, yeah.
And every morning, Andy and I would get up and we'd be knocking on Johnson's door saying, "Okay, we gotta go. We gotta be on set in 5 minutes. You gotta get up, man."
Yep.
And he put it, the graveliest, like so clearly still intact. Andy and I finally were like, "All right, dude, well, we're going because Greyson's gonna be mad at us if we don't get to set in time." We'd leave the house. We'd walk to set. And would arrive to find Matt there, fully dressed, in costume, with his feet up, drinking a coffee, talking to everybody.
It happened three or four times.
And it happened 3 or 4 times. We were like, "What the fuck is going on? How is he doing that?" It was like a magic trick.
It was crazy.
We have like a pre-recorded Home Alone style tape recorder.
No, that's not Home Alone. That's Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, and then one day we finally after it happened like 3 times, we were losing our minds. We got a ride from somebody.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Somebody picked us up. We didn't tell you we were getting a ride. We were just like, "Okay, going to set, Matt." Yeah, no problem. You're right there, no problem. We get into the car, we drive, and as we're pulling up, we look over and we see Johnson sprinting up the other, like top speed, sprinting up the other road.
Some strange game that I don't know what the hell why you were playing it.
I don't know. That was funny.
Strange game.
I would say one of the best days shooting, it was actually your 30th birthday.
Oh yeah.
And we had this idea. We had the big lamp that we built, and it was literally like we had to destroy it and get rid of it. And we were going to pay just to a dump to take it and get some money for the metal and stuff. And it was Jared's 30th birthday, and his parents live on this beautiful farm out in Millbrook, Ontario. And then we're just like, we should burn this. And then, like a lot of the stuff we do, it was like, oh, how could we integrate this narratively? What purpose is it going to serve? And so a couple of our art guys drove it out to this field at a friend of Jared's parents' place, and we went out there. And it was kind of misty and it was raining a little bit, and it was really the last thing we shot in our principal photography chunk. It was the end of the 6 weeks where we shot most of the major set pieces, and it was just it was a great night. We burnt the lamb. We had a big birthday party. Jared's mom made an incredible dinner, and it was a very nice moment, I think.
That's
awesome.
Definitely.
But that was the most stressed I ever was because I was in charge of fire safety.
That was a big so I said, Greyson, I'm like, Greyson, go into town, go to like the Home Hardware in this small town and get like a fire extinguisher or something. Yeah. We fucking, I mean, you see it, it's in the movie, it's an inferno. And Greyson standing there with like literally like one of these.
I still maintain that had it not been raining, which is something we don't even notice in that shot, if it had not been raining, then we would have burned that entire field down. Because that fire was completely out of control. I was standing right beside it, and I know it was completely out of control. And as I started pouring gas on it, and it started literally exploding, like we show that shot in the movie, it was the type of fire that no water could extinguish.
Well, it was kerosene. It was everything was drenched in kerosene.
Well, to put it in perspective, it was pouring rain. And it was still burning like the fires of hell. So imagine if it hadn't been pouring rain, what that would have looked
You
like.
had mild burns on your face.
My whole face was red.
The
whole face was red.
Matthew, you are by and large the most responsible member of the lot, I think. So what was your most stressed out day?
My most stressed out day. It wasn't the car chase day, which would seem like the obvious day.
That was Andy's most stressed out day.
Because I had faith
I'll
in
second
Johnson's
that. Mine
ability
too.
to stunt drive. And we shot most of the movie, and if something happened to him, I felt like we could have finished it. I get more stressed out about sort of like the sneaking around kind of stuff.
Right.
Like when we were crossing the border with all this gear and sneaking into NASA under false pretense. That's stuff like that was scary to me.
Yeah. Your most scared day by far was when we were like doing clearances for music and stuff like that. Easily.
Oh, you mean because there was so much money?
Oh yeah. Like, that was by far your most stressed out.
But Greyson might be more responsible than me.
Maybe.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, you're the one who lets all this happen, so yes.
I can only think of one irresponsible moment in your life, and you were surfing on a car.
Thank you.
What happened after that?
He can't smell.
Hey, lost something.
It depends on how many drugs Greyson did the night we burnt the lab.
How many drugs would you usually do at a given night?
I will say there were like 2 or 3 times where Johnson would start telling me something, and I would just say, "Stop talking. I don't want to have to lie about this. I don't want to know anything. You go do what you got to do."
Right.
That happened more than 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, that's a lot.
We gotta sadly wrap this up in about 8 minutes, so I want to touch on the themes a little bit. So Matt, with and Boles, with the Dirties and this, ambition is very much a huge theme, and you are certainly a very ambitious person, but you seem to like to paint ambition as a bit of a cautionary tale. Why?
Well, not cautionary. I just think that that's really true. That if you put yourself and your own advancement ahead of absolutely every other thing, then you kind of get what you paid for. And I'm not trying to say it's a cautionary tale. I just think that that's realistic. Like, this guy clearly gets what he wants, and in the Dirties he clearly gets what he wants. And I think just being faced with that is a sobering moment. That's all. Making this movie is the same way. Like, I really wanted to make this movie, really, really badly, and I was willing to do anything to get it done.
Right.
And like, here we are now, it's done, and I'm kind of feeling like the way Matt felt at the end of Operation Avalanche, which is like, man, I hope this was really worth it. Like, had to alienate a lot of people to do this, and it was like really hard for a lot of people.
Right.
So I don't know that it's a cautionary tale in so much as like, don't be ambitious, but I think there are very real costs to that kind of behavior that I'm not so good at seeing in the moment. But afterwards, I normally am pretty good at spotting it, being like, oh yeah, wow, I really, like, it maybe was a mistake for me to do all those things,
Right. Well, I think The Dirties is more of a buddy movie than Operation Avalanche is. I think at the end, at the end of The Dirties, if Owen didn't want to be Matt's friend anymore, I think that would have really broken his heart. Right?
Oh, absolutely, of course.
And I think that probably would have been worse than any bullying he endured.
By far.
Yeah, I don't think Matt Matt doesn't get what he wants at the end of The Dirty. He's not real.
That's what I'm saying.
No.
Whereas
Of course not.
He does at the end of Avalanche. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
so in a different,
also sort of
when you say get what you want, that's such a vague term. He's trying to execute a plan, and in both films, he executes a plan.
But I mean to use using your term. Well, it doesn't really matter.
I gave you everything you wanted. It wasn't what you wanted.
He gets some of the things that he wanted in Avalanche, which is that he wanted to run his own department, and he gets to run his own department, quite clearly. Whereas in The Dirties, it really seems like part of his motivation actually is to win back Owen's friend, or to prove himself to Owen, which he certainly does not do.
Right. But he thinks that he does, which is w's so awesome.
But I mean, if that movie kept going, I have a feeling he would learn that he didn't.
I think about 2 minutes more. Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
It is funny that like the few frames after that is kind of Matt going like, what? What are you? What?
What?
Whoa! Are you not? You don't like this? Whoa! Whoa! Oh shit!
Just killed the guy.
What's the best deleted scene of Operation Avalanche?
Boozy and Andy making out in the lens, eating Chinese food.
It'll be on the DVD.
By far the best deleted scene.
Yeah. Kurt, what do you think?
For real, something that we had to take out that I think most of us regret is near the beginning of when they first arrive at NASA, the guys go to the hotel room.
Oh. Yeah.
And then Matt is funny and everyone's laughing for real, and it's like, wow, these guys are really good buds.
I feel like that scene had so much shorthand in it, where you just get that these guys are real friends.
That scene was the whole movie.
I think somebody watched that scene with some girl and the girl said that
It was Boozy.
I know, I was trying to say that line. The girl said it looks like these guys had a lot of fun when they made it. Like that was her comment, wasn't it?
You know, that might be what some people
it was
say
a hat
they
you had
did.
to be there to think it's funny kind of thing.
Yeah, but I like those moments. I like it when you're watching it and it is like, oh yeah, well these guys are liking it. Yeah, I don't
miss that scene.
Oh, I do.
I miss it badly.
That's actually my
I miss it
favorite scene of the
badly.
whole film.
All right, there's one more thing I want to talk about. I can't believe I didn't mention it thus far, but let's talk about Zelig for a second, and to a lesser extent, Forrest Gump. I think you know where I'm going with this. So, I don't know. In those initial conversations where you knew you were going to Zelig this shit, what were you getting really excited about? What was the process of technically doing that? And you just pulled it off so good, so well.
I remember you talking about it very early on, basically thinking that the entire movie would be special effects shot.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize how difficult it would be. That sequence where we're in Mission Control that Tristan and Curt built, I figured, because at this time I didn't think we were going to be able to sneak into NASA, right?
Right.
So I figured all the scenes at NASA were going to have to be done that way. And it was only once we actually broke in and shot that footage and got out with it and saw, oh no, wait, we really have full scenes here, that we started to think, oh.
They let us in.
Yeah, they did.
I shouldn't say
They gave us a driver and showed us and let us do whatever we wanted.
The term break in is,
Sure. All under false pretense.
All that
We
stuff
didn't
under
knock
false
out any
pretenses.
scientists.
Well, you had the blow dart, though, for the guy who was coming for us. And against lab coat. But I thought that we were going to have to do a huge amount of the movie that way.
Right.
And in the end, the combination of getting real footage and Tristan being like, I can do 10 shots total, made me realize, no, we can't.
Tristan, how many VFX shots in the show?
75.
Wow.
Whoa.
Nice. I wish I didn't, but I got to run. Cheers to Operation Avalanche.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Congratulations. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.